a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind.
It was basically a cube with inside of a sphere where the points of the cube were touching outside of the sphere.
Roger. There's troubleshooting.
So this isn't anything that just is limited to the United States. It's a worldwide phenomenon.
That UFO podcast is powered by Zencastr. Zencastr is one of the world's leading platforms for recording and hosting podcasts. Zencastr is a modern web-based solution for high-quality audio and video podcast production. With a full suite of professional tools, Zencastr allows podcasters to quickly and seamlessly record their guests remotely and produce their podcasts in studio quality. Check out the links in the show description to find out more. Support for That UFO podcast is brought to you by Manscaped, who are the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offer precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped just launched their 4th generation trimmer, the Lawnmower 4.0. You heard that right, the 4.0. Join over 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive listener offer just for you. 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code ANDYUFO at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free worldwide shipping with promo code ANDYUFO. Manscaped engineered the ultimate groin and body trimmer by focusing on intelligent functionality and incredibly comfortable grooming experience. Their 4th generation trimmer features a cutting-edge ceramic blade to reduce any close encounters thanks to their advanced skin-safe technology. I now feel confident shaving my TicTacs. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code ANDYUFO at manscaped.com. Hi everyone, and welcome back to That UFO Podcast from the archives. My name is Andy, and this is a new show where I'm going to dip in and reintroduce some of the older original shows to new listeners because so many more of you have come into the show in the last 6 months. There are loads of really great interviews back at the start that you may not have heard yet. The first one I think is really important is a roundtable I done, the first roundtable with members of UAPx, Gary Voorhis, Kevin Day and Patrick PJ Hughes. Like I say, all part of UAPx but also witnesses to the infamous 2004 Nimitz TicTac event. You've heard the story a lot already and I get the gents to talk about, was it the US testing new tech? Is there more for the story to give? The nuclear attraction, how the incident changed the conversation, and also the West Coast entity that tracked the TicTacs that we didn't really hear much about and still haven't heard too much about to this day. There's a lot more to it as well. This is just part 1. If you've listened to it before and listened to it again, great. If not, it's a new interview for you to listen to from a year ago, and it'll be interesting for you to consider as well how the conversation has changed so much in what's almost been a year to the day since this one first aired. Thanks folks, hope you enjoy. Well, who we do have on the show with us today, we have Gary Voorhis, who you will remember was the first ever guest on That UFO Podcast, which seems a lifetime ago now, but it's just coming up 4 months now, and he is the Vice President of UAPx. We have Kevin Day, who is the President of UAPx, and Patrick Hughes, who is the Director of Information Technology, if I've got that all correct. I'd like to say welcome and good afternoon to all you gents. Gary, first of all, how are you doing?
Good afternoon.
Hey, thanks for having us on.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
No, thank all of you for your time as well. So it's great to speak to you. So the format, what we're going to do for the listeners is start off with each of you introducing yourselves and a little bit about the role you played in the now infamous events of November 2004. You might have done some other interesting things that month, but I'm sure the main thing was your activities on the Nimitz carrier group. We're then going to move on to discuss a few different things off the back of that, how things have progressed and changed over the last kind of decade and a half, not to age anyone on here, but it is now getting on 16 years. And then obviously from there, we've got some questions on UAPx and a lot of listener questions that will make up the bulk of the show as well. If we could start off, Gary, yourself, if you want to just introduce yourself, your background and what your kind of role was in the events of 2004.
All right. Well, my name is Gary Voorhis Jr. I was an Aegis computer technician at the time, a junior personnel. I was the one that actually operated and maintained all the Aegis weapon system, all of the mainframe computers that ran that system, and the consoles that operated in CIC. CIC is Combat Information Center, for those who didn't know. That's when you're looking in the movies, all those big screens that they're looking at. We took care of all those. And of course, the story has been beaten to a crisp. So we'll just sum it up into we tracked unknown aircraft for right around 7 days back in 2004, and it's now become pretty renowned since the United States government military has basically admitted that what we saw was real.
It certainly was. Thanks for that little summary. PJ, Patrick Hughes, if you want to just introduce yourself, as I've kind of done for you anyway, and tell the listeners a little bit about you.
Sounds good. My name is Patrick, or PJ. I answer to just about anything. I was an avionics technician way back when all this happened. And while I wasn't special like Gary or Kevin, my so-called claim to fame, as some people call it, is a couple of U.S. Air Force guys showed up on my ship, knocked on my door with my executive officer, and took a whole bunch of my classified stuff and left. And
I'm going to go ahead and counteract the fact that he says he's not special. It takes it does take a unique person to be able to that level of technician in the Navy, because there's a lot of education and a lot of schooling, and not everybody makes it through that type of school. So, I mean, we're not talking SEALs here, but we're talking, it's still pretty hardcore to go through a lot of that training.
Yeah, PJ wasn't fixing seagulls, for anyone who's interested in the technology that he was working with.
Actually, they were hypersonic seagulls. I was just informed that on my own feed.
Yeah, my apologies. And lastly, but not least, Kevin, if you want to introduce yourself to the listeners too, please.
Yeah, I'm Kevin Day. 2004, it was actually my last ship on the Princeton. It was actually my last underway, too, believe it or not, when this happened. When it went down, I had 18 years sea time sitting behind that Spy 1 radar system on the Aegis. This was my third Aegis ship. I am a Top Gun graduate, went through Top Gun in 1998. And I was an anti-air warfare coordinator on the ship. It was basically just the guy that launches the missiles if we ever had to in a time of war or even for an exercise. And I agree, man. These objects, whatever the hell they were, they acted as if they were alive, like some super capable flock of birds is how I like to describe it. They were sentient and they were aware, and they were apparently precognitive as well, because they seemed to go in directions and ways that just kind of seemed like they were reading the pilot's minds, if you will. It was very, very, very strange encounter, to say the least.
Very, very strange, but obviously now very, very famous. And folks, if you want to hear the detail behind the encounter, there are now numerous documentaries, numerous shows. There are the Nimitz encounters on YouTube, where you can see Kevin, PJ, and Gary all being interviewed. Gary's been interviewed on my own show in the very first episode. The story is now infamous and obviously unidentified. Has been a massive smash hit now. The second season finishes as we're recording this evening, and I've been lucky enough to see the final episode as well. And it certainly does end on a bombshell. Lasts 1 minute and 40 seconds. If anyone else has seen it by now when this gets released, I won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it. What I do want to get straight into talking about, though, speaking of bombshells, Patrick, PJ, on Twitter, you recently dropped a bit of a bombshell and you added to the story. And like Gary had said before, this has been beaten to a crisp, and this is something that just doesn't seem to go away. However, you added to the story that a West Coast land-based entity, and you know what the wording's like on UFO Twitter, people will jump on the slightest thing as you find out. You said, so a West Coast land-based entity was tied to your battle group, and if what they saw was released, it would back up what you guys were saying all along. So what is it that you guys have been saying all along, PJ? What are they backing up if they're released?
I mean, essentially, all the tracks that Kevin saw, all the maneuvers Kevin saw, all the stuff Gary saw, all the stuff the Hawkeye saw. There was an outside group, and the only person who's figured it out is Gary, although he only partially figured it out.
No,
that saw
I know exactly what you're talking about. That's just the only non-classified thing I could find about that particular place.
Yeah. And like I said, Gary knows.
So listen, the word classified and non-classified is probably going to come up a few times here. What can you talk about then regarding this, just to elaborate on it a bit? Because PJ opened up a bit of a thread on your Twitter feed, and people really wanted to know. So what can you talk about dancing around the classified nature of things?
I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff up and down the West Coast, from Upper Washington down to San Diego, all for various reasons, to various stuff. There just happened to be one spot that the Hawkeyes worked with routinely. I'm sure Gary, whether or not he realized it, has dealt with them before. But I happen to know one of the individuals there because they did work with our Hawkeyes. And I've talked to him on and off over the years. And I had recently shared Dave Beatty's documentary with him just because I knew he was around and he was there. And all of a sudden he's like, hey, I know stuff about this. And he starts telling me. We had a lengthy off-the-record conversation, so I can't say everything he said. But they saw all the same stuff. Their systems and their sensors were able to track the same stuff that the Spy 1 did. The same crazy maneuvers that Kevin saw. The same,
yeah, I didn't know that.
All of it. I don't know if they have recordings of it. I don't know what was made of it, but they saw it, and they are completely separate from the battle group. So it's not like they were seeing our information. They were seeing anything we were sharing. They were seeing it on their own gear, and they were at a fair distance from where we were.
Okay, so in my mind, and I'm not saying this is what it was, but my knowledge of the West Coast of America is very limited. I just know they have one, okay, and an East Coast. So I'm imagining something like some kind of missile defense building, or let's just say like a NASA office that's just tracking all sorts of things that they might be tracking. And what you're saying is these guys have whatever systems that picked up the same contacts that Gary picked up, that Kevin picked up, and that eventually kind of had a bit of a play with the carrier group over the course of a week. Is that right?
Correct.
And did they pick
the system that he was talking about? After World War II, and us being surprise attacked, that was kind of the system that they went all up and down the coast. I think he's talking about our missile defense system, which then tracks pretty much a fair distance out from all borders and all territories that we control. It would have definitely have picked up the same things that we were. Plus, I'm pretty sure a lot of those systems are now tied into the CEC systems too. So,
one thing that did come across in the questions that I'll get to later on was the military language that some of the people have been using. I can only pretend to understand fully the questions that you guys will get to later on as well. But something that was kind of jumped on was that you had to state, PJ, that the entity had no control or association with the object, because one of the things, and I'll address this, I think, to Kevin, given how much you saw and you talked about the way these objects behaved, a lot of people now are starting to wonder, especially with some of the recent journalists and investigative journalists online, are these objects actually man-made? And there are people coming out saying this was potentially Air Force that were covering this up. This has been something that the US government themselves have basically put out there to test its own armed forces against. What would you say to that, given what you experienced?
I have a lot of trouble believing this was us, because I, for one, was psychologically affected by this. As it turns out, I didn't know it at the time, and I have since been diagnosed with PTSD, and they thought it was from an earlier event that happened in my life when on my first deployment on the Vincennes, when we shot down an airliner by mistake. But I think it was more related to this. So if it turns out that this was us testing us and it had this type of effect on some of us, there might be hell to pay. You know, I'm not going to be happy if that's turns out to be the truth. I'll tell you that right now. This profoundly affected my life.
I wouldn't be honestly. I wouldn't be surprised if it was, something of ours. But then again, in the same respect, the only thing that really troubles me with it being like ours, it would really mean that they're capable of keeping the type of secrets that we all hope that they can't. Because like the level of technology that was involved with these crafts was, I couldn't even tell you how many years ahead because it's too many. I don't understand how that kind of technology could be held secret for this long, because it would have, because we've been seeing these things for 60 years. So probably more than that. I mean, if you want to talk, ancient aliens, anything like that. I mean, they cite about 1 billion and one other references throughout all of our human history where we've been seeing stuff in the sky. So, I don't prescribe to the little green man theory as of yet because I haven't seen one, but I don't say that, I think that this is not a win-win situation for even our company, because I've even sat down with our guys, our board of directors, and said, look, we've got serious thoughts about doing this research because there's some avenues that, and some things that, we really have to think about, because no matter what it is, we're going to run into the government at a certain point, because if it is government technology, we're going to run into the government because we're going to have proof of it. If it's not, then we're going to run into the government because we have proof of it. So no matter what, we're running into the government. And so either our government is the most shady pieces of crap that can hide this level of technology for this amount of time, or they're not. And either way, it's scary as hell, because one way we're all not in control, and in the other way, guess what? We're not in control still. So we all just kind of live this beautiful illusion of freedom at this point. Yeah, it's kind of scary shit.
It's both very good points. And Kevin, you touch on something that I've had a few chats recently with guests about, and Ryan Sprague has just released a book that touches on the human element of alien or ET experiences and UAP experiences. And like you say, that's huge, and not even to go down the route of, claims that could go in against the US government from, its own armed forces and people and a variety of different areas. But like you say as well, Gary, that if this turns out this is our technology, just as in humankind, then it's such a leap that there are so many more questions of, okay, so where's it came from? Is it back engineered from something else? Have we just one day broken the laws of physics and uncovered all this great new stuff? Why haven't we been using it? There's so many different avenues to go down. However, a show that you're all very aware of, and a group, To the Stars Academy, Chris Mellon, Lou Elizondo, Jim Semivan, Tom DeLong, Hal Putov, and the guys, they very much, even still in this second season where PJ, you've been a regular contributor, they are very much adamant, and they keep going back to, this isn't Russian, this isn't Chinese, this more than likely isn't ours. They seem very confident with that. So like PJ, to you, given your experiences with Unidentified, how confident are you, again, having worked with the guys on Unidentified, that this is or isn't US technology?
The only person I really talked to from that whole group is Lou Elizondo. And we had a much longer conversation than, was actually shown on the series. And we never really got into, is it ours? Is it theirs? He cleared up a whole bunch of questions I had about what happened to my stuff after he took it, where it went, what it was used for. He's the person I actually learned all that information from. But I got the feeling from him that all he wants to do is know what it is. I don't think he cares one way or the other. He just wants to know what it is, just like the rest of us.
And again, to not spoil it, because I'm more than likely going to release this just before the finale of Unidentified this evening, they wrap up with it's quite a moving summary, and I don't know if any of you have seen the final episode yet. They wrap up with a very moving summary of, they're quite clear on what they think this is without saying it. And again, the line is used, this is not ours, this is not Russian, this is not Chinese. And something Lou Elizondo has said in the past is talking about humankind's and mankind's, plural, that it's not just us on this planet. And again, that's something he finishes the series with, and he gets a little bit emotional about it. And again, that comes across the aspect of, if there's more than us on this planet, then it opens up a whole new ball game. It changes humanity. And again, those are all questions that are for hypotheses and down the line and a lot of different conversations. What I'd like to ask though for you guys, so To the Stars Academy, it's really been the key in unlocking the door, which so many are now walking through, including people like yourselves that are now following in your footsteps. Do you think there's more to come from this incident itself? So even just the other day, PJ, you've obviously dropped that bombshell on Twitter, and it's added a new element to the conversation. However, is there much more to get out of this, or are we now kind of flogging a dead horse?
No way. Our group has been vindicated over and over and over again. I think it's still going to keep happening. Every agency that comes out pretty much backs up everything we've all said. And my gut instinct is that this was not our stuff, and that in itself asks a lot of brings up a lot of real important questions. If it wasn't ours, who the hell's was it? Was it even from Earth? I think this story has legs, and it's just gonna keep delivering. I really do.
Well, I know as for me, I think our events basically just the straw that broke the camel's back. It's the catalyst. They'll look back and take a look at how this all started, and it'll be that New York Times article about our event, and then all of us coming out and then Fravor coming out and saying his piece, and then just recently the pilot that actually recorded the video itself came out to clear a lot of things up too. So I mean, it's just going to keep happening, because there was I think we had 500 and something people on my ship and 7,000 people on the carrier. That's a lot of people, and that's a lot of people that knew about it. I mean, even if they didn't directly have anything to do with it, or any systems that interacted with it, those communities, they know. We all know. And I mean, it's just like with with Kevin's been definitely affected by this tremendously. We all have in one way or another. And for me, it's just been absolutely mind-boggling to know that this is finally coming to light, because I honestly never thought it would. I remember when I first came out about it, I did a lot of phone calls to a lot of important people to make sure that it was all right that I said anything about it, because I really didn't want to knock on the door, and so I got a lot of my old buddies that, they didn't go into cable when they got out. They stayed in the circles and, got the high level government jobs. And, so they let me, I said, all right, I got the least to lose out of everybody. So let's do it.
God bless you, Gary Voorhis.
You've all played an incredible part in this, and telling those stories and being the first people to do it has been amazing. And like I say, there are now so many more following in your footsteps. So no doubt in the last 3 years, we've seen an incredible amount of progress. And for those that have got a keen interest in ufology, like myself, people who initially just were interested in other aliens coming from other planets and spaceships, the conversation in 3 years has changed incredibly. And just the understanding people have as well. There's a lot of vindication for people like yourself as well, and military, commercial pilots, police officers, and just the general public that report and see UAPs that, they're not crazy. Well, not all of them. And that, some of these sightings are as incredible as they sound. If this same incident that happened to you in 2004 was repeated again tomorrow. And we hear that up until, recently, and you guys might even know more recent than me, that these events are still happening. How do you feel the conversation would change from that military perspective? I don't know who wants to come in on that.
I think if I was, an aegis computer technician, or actually they're not, there's no such thing as a computer technician anymore. They call them Q70 techs or whatever they are now. It's been so many years. But I think at this point, if it were to happen to me again, and I still had the prior knowledge of the 2004 event, I think I would have a lot more information on hand when I got out. I think I'd have a nice little safety deposit box for when I pass.
I certainly would have kept copies.
Yeah, especially today. I would have kept better notes, better copies. I had my logbook, of course, but I just had real brief notes like Latin longs and time and stuff like that, and who I was controlling. But I would have definitely kept better notes. In fact, in 2009, after I retired, I tried to tell people about this, and even some of my closest associates would look like, what's wrong with Kevin? For sure that happened, right? So I wrote the story and I published it in the Library of Congress just in case the story ever did come to light, that it would be some sort of contemporaneous proof that it really happened. And that's exactly what happened, strangely enough.
Ironically, with Kevin doing that very thing, it's made me go back and look at a lot of science fiction I've read a little differently. It's like, wait a minute. How did they get these intricate ideas like this?
and on that,
really happen, yeah.
It's funny you mentioned, have any of you read Chains of the Sea? Because this is a short story recently that's kind of came to prominence with Lou Elizondo mentioning or having read it, and a lot of people again have jumped on this bandwagon. Have any of you read that book or short story?
I have not. I've actually been getting knee deep into Philip K. Dick lately.
Say the name of the book again.
It's Chains of the Sea. It's a bit of a short story.
No, I haven't read it. I'm pretty sure I haven't.
Probably worth checking out. It wouldn't take you too long. But again, people are getting on the idea that a lot of the ideas that are now coming to the front, that, we're not alone on the planet, these things may have been here or in different frequencies, different dimensions, that we're starting to see in various different books and prose, like you mentioned, Gary. Some of the things you're now reading, it's like, oh wow, was this pure chance that people have got this right, or so accurate so long ago, or did they have any kind of prior knowledge? So that's something. What I'd like to know, Kevin, if I could just ask a question on the idea of the military conversation changing. If someone in your position now, today, the same sort of event happened, do you feel they would have a different experience than you had? Do you think they're going to be able to come forward with all the progress that's been made?
I believe so, yeah. I believe there's probably, in fact, procedures in place now that didn't exist when we were serving, and designed specifically to deal with unknown aerial phenomenon. Because I got to tell you, Andy, the thing that concerned me greatly in 2009, 2008, when I retired, when no one would listen to me, was what would happen if this thing happened off the coast of Iran, when I really did have missiles on the airplanes and on the ships, and somebody freaked out and overreacted. Man, this thing could cause a freaking war, that no one wants. And I think because of that, safety of flight issues, I think there's probably some pretty written and trained procedures in place now that just weren't there when we were serving in 2004. So, and if it did happen, I think it's all going to get recorded and logged and spoken about at this point. I truly do. That's and my evidence for that saying it, 2015. I mean, those guys came out. That was 11 years later, so that's just my thoughts on it.
No, it's good. There's been a lot of talk as well recently around the fact the carrier group had a nuclear element to it, was some kind of attraction to these objects. Again, Unidentified had a whole episode, and I'll come to PJ on that one because you rolled your eyes. So you must have some kind of comment you want to make, and I've been more than happy to hear it. What are your thoughts on that aspect of it? Is that putting 2 and 2 together and getting 5?
I just don't think the amount of nuclear subs we have, the 11 nuclear carriers we have, I feel we would see a lot more than what we've seen if that were the case. I don't think it has anything to do with nuclear power. And that's coming from a guy who slept next to a reactor for an entire cruise.
And it had no ill effects whatsoever, which is always good to see.
None that I know of.
So listen, what's next? The UAP Task Force has now been signed off. That's made its way through the Senate in the US, which is great. And I'm learning more and more about US politics, as the whole world is over the last few years. And we've all got our eyes on things, But staying away from the political side of it and just focusing on the UAP Task Force. With that forming, Gary, I'll bring this to you. What's your opinions on the UAP Task Force? What's that going to bring regarding the conversation and the movement?
Realistically, I think it's just a dog and pony show. I don't think it's going to really do much other than maybe distribute more information that they actually want us to know. When it comes down to it, there's over 100 other countries that are starting up a space program. 23 of those countries are slated to go to the moon. With that many countries now starting actual space programs, I think that that's probably more the catalyst of why they're needing to get more of this information out faster. And I mean, there could also be something that we have no idea about. And the idea that there's another race of beings living on our planet with us is not very far-fetched. I mean, we've already figured out that there's water deep below. That giant borehole that Russia made, we figured out through that there's literally an ocean underneath the damn crust, which we never knew was there. There literally could be an entire civilization underneath our crust. We've never been there. We don't know what's really actually there. So, I mean, they could have been here the entire time we've been evolving and just patted us on the head. Oh, that's a good monkey. You're doing so good. I mean, but when it comes down to it, people still have to realize that they can't see us as equals if they were already developed before we even started to when we were, beating each other with rocks and eating meat raw because we couldn't start a fire, there's no way in hell they're going to treat us as equals. So keep that in mind.
And I suppose when you say that, that makes me think a little bit about someone like Tom DeLonge, who I know is a divisive figure still, and he makes a lot of outrageous comments, but he talks about a disturbing aspect to the phenomena. And is that something that, potentially he's getting at? Gary?
Well, I think with him being the owner of that company, and the one view that I have about Lou is, kind of to sum it up is that he doesn't want to know what it is. He already knows what it is. And because of his ties with his prior jobs, just like all of us, I can't tell you the exact range of Spy 1 Bravo radar, but, I can tell you what we can't do. I can, lead you to the water, but I can't force you to drink it. I mean, we all know for a fact that there's craft that enter our atmosphere that can do Mach 25 plus, that have no wings, that have no discernible engines, that somehow can maneuver on a dime at any angle, speed, or any vector at all. That in itself should be amazing enough. That should be literally enough to say, yeah, let's get some people on this. Wow, and it's for as many people that actually have credible backgrounds, that have credibility, that have seen these things. Just the empirical evidence alone should have already lent to the scientific communities. So that denotes that there has been an active measure of trying to keep this all under wraps. There's no way in hell you can tell me that the empirical evidence that there is out there now is not enough to base any type of science on. I mean, look at some of the whacked out science that they've already done that it's okay because it has nothing to do with something this big.
Can I just go right back to almost one of your first comments you made on this as well? Because at first it sounded almost dismissive, but you've made a really great point off the back of it regarding the UAP Task Force, that it's going to be potentially, in your view, a bit of a dog and pony show. But then you mentioned that we've got 23 other countries potentially planning on going to the moon. Do you mean the idea that they want to control the narrative, as in the US government or the UAP Task Force do, because these other countries are going to go into space and then start to see things that we can't guarantee they keep under wraps? Is that what you mean?
What it means is basically these all these countries can't be guaranteed that they're going to say what they want you to say, or what our government wants them to say, or what the collective of governments that can go into space will say. When it comes down to it, if they don't control the narrative, they got to make sure at least they're controlling the storyline as it goes. So if we already know about it, hey, no big deal that, Estonia decided that they put up a satellite and then saw literally something docked with it or something. And then they said, hey, yeah, so this happened. All of a sudden we don't know what's up anymore. And we're not the ones on top of things. And I think that is.
Andy, this is yep. No, go ahead. Sorry, I jumped on you.
No, go on, Kevin.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, Andy. My thoughts on the task force are this. And I'll just make this my public announcement to the members of the task force, Senator Rubio and all those guys. If you guys are serious about finding these things and understanding what it is, then you might want to consider helping to fund our expeditions, because we have a whole bunch of really smart people lined up to go on these ships with a really full lineup of new technologies, and some of them are still under development. And we are ready to go. We need funding. We need a little bit of money. And fortunately, it's not that much money that we need. None of us are getting paid. None of us ever hope to get paid doing this. It's strictly for logistics. All of our funding requirements and any other requirements that we have, it's not to, we're not doing this to pay people.
And Kevin, listen, it's a great timing, because my next question is asking yourself to talk a little on UAPx and its status. Now, UAPx, my last conversation about it was with Gary back in late April, early May. And we talked about UAPx starting up, and obviously COVID's been around, and here we are 4 months later, and it's still doing the rounds, unfortunately, regardless what people want to think about it. Where are UAPx as a company at, and what are the plans? What's the kind of status of it?
Go ahead, Gary. Fill that, and I'll fill in some cracks and stuff.
All right.
If you don't mind.
All right. So primary reason why I'm going to be filling this in is because due to Kevin having a lot of personal things going on with the fire and the their golf course, and he's had to spend a lot of time in his personal life where I've kind of taken the reins up to take care of the day-to-day stuff. So currently we did a restructuring since the last time we talked. We've kind of had to streamline it due to budget restraints versus what. Because like I said, our whole priority is just to go out and do this research off the coast of San Diego. So with that in mind, I had to look at our staff, and we had to look at the people that were involved with the company, and, say, okay, is this person really viable for this mission? And it had nothing to do personally, whether they were viable in any other capacity. It was just, I had to look at just our mission. This mission is to do this particular task. We're probably going to have about enough money to get about 15 people out on this boat. And that's so that we can maximize the amount of money for our testing equipment, for budget for things, so that we can actually get the detailed information that we want to out there. And I know last time I spoke about how, we plan on getting ridiculous amounts of information, and we do, and there's a lot of groundwork that has to be laid to get that, because we have to be able to set parameters so that we're not wasting a lot of time on information that's already been gathered by national organizations or the other private entities that make their findings public. So we've been utilizing a lot of the time, this COVID downtime, to do that restructuring. And, currently we're doing a lot of emailing back and forth, and, it's a very pish posh kind of way of trying to get all this stuff done. So right now I'm getting us on board with the Google Suite so that we can utilize a lot of that management, and we can start working on the same project at the same time, and start to actually get more done without having to keep waiting for an email to come back or waiting for a response. People can just go in and check on the project, add what they have to add, and then move on. And once we get that done, that's going to be a big mile marker for us, because then that brings our productivity to a ridiculous level. And then I'm hoping by the end of the month to have our website complete with our Patreon and with our with forums, which people will be able to interact with us on a more personal basis. Our Patreons will have access to a Patreon only forum, which then they can actually get one-on-one with practically anybody they want, because all of us will be active on those forums, talking back and forth. It's a way for the public to be able to interact with us and, give us their ideas, comments, and, you never know where the next great idea is going to come from. So, those forums are eventually going to roll into my archives idea that I was trying to roll out a little earlier, but once I had to start doing the day-to-day with UAPx, I kind of had to push that back. But I still plan on doing that aspect of our company too. But one project at a time. Got a little too ambitious for my own good. But right now we're working on getting grants through particular college. We've written up a grant and a proposal, and I can't really comment on any who, where, or what. And hopefully that goes through. We've already set up a PayPal account so people can start to donate to the cause. Hopefully by the end of the month we'll have some T-shirts that people can buy saying everything from just our logo to I support UAPx type stuff. At first it'll be kind of some simple logos, but we'll eventually have some more trendy stuff on there. It's mostly just to try to get that store up and running, get the infrastructure done, and then we're going to move from there. But I figured within the next 3 months tops, we should have the complete infrastructure of UAPx completely done. Everything up and running smooth like butter, and from there, basically by the end of this year, I'm kind of hoping that we could basically go anytime we have enough money to actually go. Basically, that's where I want to get us to the point where we're basically, as soon as we got the money, we're out the door.
And when you look at the UAPx site at the moment, it's got that mission statement on there. And the thing that stands out to me is very much there's a correlation between that it talks about whale migrations and that mid-November time of year, and you do still hope to see that you can find UAPs in a certain area at that time of year. Is that still the thinking?
Well, after we did a lot of research, from historical data in that area, looking at, I don't think it really matters what time we go, because there's been sightings year round in that area. It's a literal hotspot. I mean, people have seen them in the winter, in the summer, in the fall, every month. I think there's been at least one sighting every day of the year somewhere around that area in the Catalinas or off the coast or down toward more closer to Baja. But that whole area, every single day, people are seeing things.
So that's
been the case for years. Yeah, for years now.
Yeah, and I mean, we have at least 100 years of historical data for that area that just denotes that. I mean, there's some people that have told me that they could bring you out every day of the week and show you something. Now, granted, what kind of phenomenon they're actually going to come out and show us, I mean, they could be, I have no idea, but we hope that we're going to get some good data. But worst case scenario, we can do a thorough analyze this area so thoroughly that we are be able to know the differences between, because this will be the first time that we go out. And this is going to be a lifelong venture. We're going to have to study this area over and over and over again so that we can compare original data to current data to, and keep going on and have a historical data of that area of, temperatures, migrations of animals, what type of plant and fauna, plants and animals live there, how many of them can affect different frequencies, what kind of radio stations are out there, what kind of people are out there, what kind of all the projects that are done in that area, because there's a lot of government testing that goes out that way. When I say government testing, I'm thinking like radar systems, sonar systems, missile control systems, things like that. These are the benign stuff that none of us are interested in, but they all use frequencies in some way, shape, or form. They all affect that area in some way, and basically we don't want to leave any stone unturned when we look at that area. We want to know how much radiation is, if there's any radiation hotspots of any type of radiation, whether it's gamma, beta, alpha. Some of these radiations only last for they're very, very insubstantial by themselves unless there's a source emitting them at the time. So if we're getting big hot spots of these types of radiations, well, what the hell's causing it? These are all indications that we're going to be able to hopefully track, find, and keep doing more research on it. And then the best thing that could happen is we can actually catch them and find them and see them on radar, get the type of data that we had in the service. That would be absolutely amazing, and that's the ultimate goal, but it's just going to take time.
And I'll make sure the links again are for the PayPal as well, because it's a really worthy cause, and I look forward to getting some of those T-shirts, and you can count me among one of your first Patreons as well. I'll make sure I'm signed up to that when the time comes. Listen, we'll take a short... No, of course. We'll take a short break, when we come back...
That is all for this week's show. Thank you very much for listening. Please remember to leave the podcast a review on your chosen platform. You can like, retweet and subscribe. That would all be very much appreciated. The shows are being uploaded onto YouTube as we speak more and more. You can sign up at patreon.com/That UFO Podcast to access the shows ad-free as well. Please get in touch on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, That UFO Podcast. Of course, on Twitter, it's at UFO UAPam. And again, folks, as always, keep looking up. You never know what you might see.
It wasn't a tic-tac and not quite a saucer, more like a hubcap designed by Chaucer, a little baroque and quite steampunk, like Alice was playing bass for the Parliament of Folk. The little fucker hovered right outside of my window, and when I shoved out the screen, he made it an issue. I don't think he expected me to see his ass, but I'd had some champagne and smoked a little around. Meditative gamma state full on meta. Can't imagine how it could have been any better. I got to the top of the stairs and there he was. Like, you awake? I was about to abduct you, cuz. I jumped back and nearly kissed myself, and I climbed out the window after the elf, and I woke up in my bed and there was something on my head and everything was weird and everything was red. And I called out to my boys. They thought this was noise. They thought it was a dream. They thought it was my toys. They thought it was my problems, and they think I should seek therapy, and I don't know what it is because it doesn't really scare me. If you really want to know who I think I be, I think it's you and me and us and we and him and her and that and she and that thing over there and what's that, Jay? But if we're being serious, open your mind, consider your heart, consider time, consider your space, consider your lies, consider your life, consider your eyes. It wasn't a tic-tac and not quite a saucer. It wasn't a tic-tac and not quite a saucer.
Fixing a small wind farm to your roof is one change you could make to be more sustainable. Fixing a broken chair instead of buying a new one is another change you could make to be more sustainable. One's hard, one's not so hard, but both help. Change a bit for good. IKEA, the wonderful everyday.